Hey guys, so in this video, we're going to be building some custom user registration and a login page. So a user can sign up and then log in and view pages. But at this point, all the pages can be viewed. So later on in the video, we'll actually set some permissions. So a page can only be viewed if a user is logged in. So that's what we'll cover in this video. But in the next video, we'll actually handle user permissions. So for example, we want an admin to see the admin dashboard, but we don't want a customer to be able to see what the admin can see or do. So a customer should be able to log in and only see what the customer is allowed. So that's what we'll cover in the video after this one. So it's kind of going to be a two-part series. So what I'll do right now is just go over our code and show you what we have, because I did add a few things if you're following the course here. So I just added a registration page. So we have this view and a login page. And I set up the URL paths, and we have these two templates. So they're in accounts, and we have login.html and register.html right here. So they're just two blank templates. So what I'm going to do is actually start building in within these. So make sure you have these built out if you're following along, or you can just download the source code. And then we'll go from there and actually start customizing these. So let's drag our project in, and let's make sure all the pages are working. So we'll just check out /login, and let's check out register now. So the paths should be working. And the first page we're going to work on is going to be this register page. So what we're going to do here is we're going to import the default Django user creation form. So Django actually gives us a form that handles a lot of that, a lot of the functionality for this. So it takes care of all the form fields for us, things like password hashing and so on. So we're going to use that default form. We could manually build this out, but Django makes it very easy, and I'll show you later how to customize this. So we'll actually have some control over it instead of just having to deal with whatever Django gives us. So let's go ahead and run that import. So up here, let's do from django.contrib.auth.forms import user creation form, and make sure these are capitalized at the beginning of these. And now that we have this form, let's go ahead and just render it. So let's do form is going to be equal to user creation form, and pass that into our template and see what we get here. So in our template, I'm going to build out a quick form. We'll use register here. So we'll just do form, and I'll just set the method to post really quick before we forget this. And the action is just going to be sent to that URL that we're currently on. So we're just going to leave that blank. So we'll do that. And now that we pass in the form, we can render it. So here is the default Django user creation form. So if I do this and reload the page, this is the default form that Django gives us. So it gives us a username, password, and the password confirmation. So what I'll do right now is actually create that input field so we can create a user, handle that process, and then we'll actually add an email to this form, and we'll do a little customizing of this, customization with this, so we can actually see how we can work with it. And I'll show you how a user is added to the admin panel. So let's go back to the template here, and all we need to add is an input, and the type will be submit, and we'll just say create user. And I just want to make our form look a little better, so we'll just do as_p. And what that's going to do is just clean up our form so everything's not just kind of scrambled around here. It's actually going to put paragraph tags around each input field and make it show up line by line. So at this point, what I'm going to do is go ahead and put a CSRF token here. So when we submit the data, Django is actually able to handle this. So CSRF_token. And we need this for Django. It's just a safer way of sending data. And let's actually process this form. So we'll process it like any other form. We've covered this in the past, so if you're part of the series, you should be familiar with this. All we're going to do is send the post data. Then in our view, we're going to say if request.method is equal to post, let's go ahead and throw that data into the form. So we're going to render the form again, and we'll just pass in that post data. So the username and those two passwords. And then we'll validate that form. So we'll say if form.is_valid, go ahead and save it. So if I save this form, it's going to create that user. And this is the cool thing about using Django's default user creation form, is that normally we would have to do things like make sure that username's not used before, hash the password, and so on. So it actually handles all of that for us. So it's as easy as saving it. So what I'll do now is go ahead and move this to the side and open up the admin panel so we can see this user be created. So I'll go ahead and refresh this, and let's check out our admin panel and see this user be created. So if I go to users, we'll create our first user, and we'll just call this user Eric IV, and I'll give it a password, and we'll make sure to type that in twice there and submit. So we're not seeing anything. That should have sent it. Yeah, so it sent it, but because I didn't redirect or anything like that, we're still on the page. But if we refresh the admin page, there we go. We have a user, Eric Ivy. So the user is created, but I want to customize this for him. So I don't like how all of this shows. I would like to handle this information myself and maybe put that onto the template. And I also want the user to have an email when the user is created. And as you can see, by the way, here, the password was hashed. So that's what that form did for us. But I want to be able to later maybe do something like the first and last name, the email, and so on. So for now, I'll just add an email to this user creation form. So let's go ahead and actually go into our forms.py file. So if you're not part of the series, I keep my forms in a file called forms.py, and we've already created some model forms earlier. So we'll just go ahead and customize our user creation form from here. So we'll just move it down here. And let's run this import one more time here. And I'll actually put that above right there. And we actually need to import forms. So from Django, import forms. And we also need to import the default Django user model. So to do this, this is the user model, by the way, right here, what you're seeing in the admin panel. So Django already created this for us. So we just need to import this and start working with it. So this is going to be from Django.contrib.auth.models. And then we need to do import user. So it's a capital U. That's the user model. And now we can start working with it. So it's actually very similar to this one right here. So everything up until models is actually the same. So now let's go ahead and create our form. So let's do class, and we'll call this create user form. So I want to name it something a little different. So this is user creation form. We're going to call this create user form. So create user form is actually going to inherit from this original form. So it's actually going to be a replica of the same exact form. It's going to have the same processing and everything. So we'll just go ahead and replicate it and then customize the fields. So we'll do meta, we'll specify the model, and this is why we needed to import that user. So the model is going to be user, and the fields, instead of just giving it all the fields with this this method right here, we're going to do fields is going to be, and then we can actually list these out in a Python list here. So I went ahead and read the documentation, so I already know what these are all called. So just go ahead and either read that or follow along with me. But we need the username, and then we want to have the email present there. And the two password fields are simply password 1 and password 2. And that's going to give us a form with only these fields right here. So actually, it's exactly what we have out here, except for it's going to add that email field. And let me refresh that. I was working on this earlier, so I want to make sure that everything's running. So at this point, you're actually going to see the form without that email that we originally had. And then if I go ahead and render this form, let's go ahead and import the user creation form. So from forms, I have order form in here, and we'll just do that and import create user form. So create user form is now going to replace user creation form. So we'll go ahead and replace it there and there. So now we're having a new form being rendered out into our template. So if I refresh our template, you're going to see an email field appear here. So we have that email field. So now if I actually create a user, and let me open up the admin panel again. So if I create a user, and we'll just call this Tim IV, and this time we'll give Tim an email. So we'll say timiv@gmail.com, and I'll just go ahead and give him a password. And I'm submitting again. We're not working with that refresh, but we should see, if I refresh the admin panel, we should see a new user appear. So what's happening here is the same process is being taken care of, but now Tim has an email field. So again, the password is still being hashed. It's still that user creation form, but that's how we're able to customize it. So let's say I don't want these fields in here. So what I'm going to do is actually manually render this form. So we'll go into our register.html file, and I could do something like this where I can just go ahead and loop through all the fields. So for field in form, and then just can close this out with an end for, and then I can just say render each field. So field, and that would just go ahead and loop through my form and list out each field. So it's not going to have, oops. Okay, so it's not going to have any of all of that markup there. So I could also just do something like field.label, so we can list out that label and access that attribute. And now we have our cleaned up form. So what I'm going to do is, instead of just looping through that, and I just wanted to show you that method because that's actually how I handle a lot of my forms, because this makes it a little bit more dynamic, but I'm just going to render each field. So I'm going to do form.username, and we can actually access each form field this way. So if I just do username, it'll just be listed. So we just have the username, and I can just do something like username.label so I can see which one it is. So username.label, and that should list that out. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just do this a few times. So I'm going to do this for email, and just do email here. And then I'm going to do this for the two password fields. So password 1, and we'll also do this for password 2. So I hope this makes sense. I'm just simply accessing the attributes, the form attributes, and rendering them out. So if I go here, we should see everything listed out here. So that takes care of our form customization, but now what we want to do is actually style this. And what I did is actually went ahead and built out 2 templates for our register and our login form, and I put them up on JS Fiddler. So you can either download the source code from this project and follow along, or if you want to actually handle this import as I'm doing it, go ahead and you'll find the 2 links for the 2 forms in the description for these 2 JS Fiddle accounts here. So we have our register form, and it's just simply some CSS, HTML, and Bootstrap, and a little bit of JavaScript. So you can actually go ahead and just copy all of this, go all the way to the bottom, copy that, and in our template, let's go ahead and move this down, and we'll actually put this form into our template that we're pasting in. So if I save this and refresh, if I refresh this page, we're going to get this form right here. So our real form is down at the bottom. So what we want to do is make sure these fields are in here so we can actually process this. So let's go ahead and take care of all of that. So let's grab our CSRF token and see where our form begins up here. So our form starts right here. The method is already post. So let's go ahead and throw in our CSRF token and then replace all these input fields. So I want to make sure that these are coming from my create register form, or sorry, create user form. So let's go ahead and start with the username. So we'll do form.username there. And then for the email, let's replace that input, and then do form.email. And let's go ahead and set the 2 password fields. So password 1 and password 2. So I'll just copy that and throw that in here. So I normally don't like doing this copying and pasting stuff, but because this is a registration and login tutorial, I don't want to have to cover all of this CSS. So I figured pasting it, copying and pasting wouldn't be too difficult here. So let's go ahead and clear out this original form now. So let's just delete everything up until that closing HTML tag. So if I refresh this, we should see our real Django form in here now, and that's all removed. And what's happening here is we're getting these placeholder values based on the little JavaScript that I did. You don't have to understand JavaScript, just make sure this is pasted in. But basically, we grab all the form fields and access them one by one because they are a list, and then set the input values. And I did this because I didn't want to go too far into customizing forms. So just make sure that's in there. And let's go ahead and build in our login page now. So for login, let's go ahead and go to our templates and do login.html. Now this one, we're not going to really need to customize from what we have in JS Fiddle. So if I go back, we'll just grab this one right here, and we can just copy pretty much everything and leave it as is. So Let's go to our login page now. And that's our blank login page. So in here, let's just go ahead and paste everything. So that's our login page. I don't think we need any customization there, but I already linked these up. So this sign up link. So if a user doesn't have an account, they can sign up, and that's taken care of right here. And I just threw in that URL path to the register page. And then the register page also has a path to the login page already there. So I built that in JS Fiddle. So as long as your URLs are called that, you should be fine. So if I decide I want to sign up, I can go to this page. If I want to log in, I can go back and forth. So now let's actually go ahead and handle another user signing up, but this time redirect them to the login page so that user can log in and also send out a flash message. So when a user is created, we get alerted for this. So to redirect a user, all we need to do is use this redirect import that we already added. So we've used this before in the tutorial series, but if you're not part of that, go ahead and just import that from Django.shortcuts. And let's just do return, redirect, and then whatever we called our login page. So we want to send the user to the login page once they're registered. We don't want to automatically log them in at this point. So we'll just go ahead and pass that in. So really quick, before we actually start working with the flash messages, I want to show the errors when a user signs up. So if I go to sign up and we add in some information, let's just say Dennis3, and we'll just give some kind of email. And if I type in a password here, so I'll just randomly throw in a password, and the next password doesn't match, so it doesn't match by characters and by length, I want to see errors show up if I register and something doesn't look right. So at this point, I'm confused. I don't see what's going on here. So if I refresh this and throw in the error messages, so to do that, just above this link right here, I want to throw in my form errors. So if I just do form.errors, and again, that's just above the area where we can link up to that login page. If I throw in the form errors, any error that we have in our form, so if I just type in some random stuff here and hit register, let's actually make this some kind of Gmail account and hit register. So password 2, so the two passwords don't match, the fields are not active. So now my errors are actually showing up. So let's go ahead and actually send a flash message and redirect to the login page. So at this point, our redirect is handled. So on form save, we redirect to the login page. So let's go ahead and import that flash message. So what a flash message is basically a way to send a one-time message to the template. So I pulled up the documentation here, and I'll actually link this in the video description. But we have a few types of flash messages we can actually use here. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this so I don't have to type that out. And we have messages for information, success, warning, and so on. And we can actually write in our own statement. So what happens is after that registration is complete, we're going to temporarily hold a flash message that will render out in our login page. So we'll say person A has been successfully created and added to the database. So what I'll do here is, and this will make much more sense once I just start adding it. So we imported from Django.contrib import messages. And now what we need to do is actually go ahead and add that message to our template here. So we don't actually have to pass it into our template, but once we state it, it's going to temporarily be held as a value. So we're going to do messages, and we're getting this from this import, and we're going to do a success message. So after that form was successfully submitted, we're going to throw in the request. And again, it's all in the documentation, so I'm just using this one. We're going to pass in this request right here. So we're going to do request, and then we're going to say our message. So we're going to say account was created for, and we want to throw in that username. So we're going to add a space there, and we're going to concatenate the username. So to get the username, we're going to say user, and we're just going to grab this from the form. So it's going to be equal to form dot cleaned underscore data. I had to look over my notes here, and we're going to do get, and then the username. So this just allows us to get that username without getting any other form attributes or anything like that. So we'll just throw in the username, And at this point, we have our flash message that gets sent. We redirect to the login page. So let's create a real user now. So at this point, let's go ahead and go to our login page or our register page. And we'll actually go back to our sign up page, and we'll just say Dennis3, and we'll do Dennis3 at Gmail. And we'll go ahead and just throw in a password. So, and this person's not actually going to get email. That's not my email, but I'm not actually having a confirmation being sent right now. So we'll just do register. So what happened here is that flash message didn't actually show up, but what happened here is that user was just created, and that flash message was actually sent to this template, and we just got redirected. So I'll actually sign up one more user, and I forgot one thing here. In order to render out the flash messages, we'll go to the login page, and again, just above this area is where we want to throw in our flash message. So we can actually access the messages in templates by just doing something like this. So we'll just do for message in messages, and we'll just end that loop. And again, we didn't have to actually pass it in. It's just stored as a value. That's what Django takes care of for us. And we'll actually throw in the messages into this paragraph tag. So we'll just do message. So for every message that we have, it'll just be thrown in here. So we'll just give this an ID. And I actually have this styled up in the template. So we'll just do messages. And now if I sign up another user, and I'll say Dennis4, and we'll do Dennis4 at gmail.com, and we'll give it a password. And we should see that flash message actually appear now. So there we go. Account was created for Dennis3 and Dennis4. So apparently it just stored that message, probably because we didn't refresh. But that message should appear once, and then once I refresh the login page, it'll disappear and it'll only be there as a one-time value. So let's actually go ahead and handle the actual login authentication. So let's go ahead and log in Dennis4 and then restrict some pages. So we'll go to our views and run a few imports here. So let's go ahead and do from Django.contrib.auth, and we'll do a few imports here. So we'll import authenticate, and this will just authenticate a user for us, and then we'll do login. So this will actually log in a user for us, and then log out. And we'll work with these all in a second here. So let's go down to our login view and actually process this. So our login form sends our username and password in as post data. So the first thing we're going to do is check if it's a post method. So if request.method is equal to post, let's grab the username and password. So we're going to do request.post.get, and we'll do username, and we'll just do the same for password. So we're going to grab the values of these fields. And if I go to my login.html page, we're getting these from these two inputs. So the first input, the name is password, and this one is username. So we're going to grab these two, but before we actually process that, let's add in a CSRF token. So CSRF underscore token, and that's just to secure the data. It won't let us submit it without it. And once we get the username and password, let's go ahead and authenticate this user. So let's make sure this user is actually in our database. So we're going to use this authenticate method here. So if I go down here, we're going to first set the user value to user and then the authenticate method. And this method is going to take in the request and then the username. So the username is going to be equal to username, and then the password is going to be password. So let's go ahead and throw these two values in, and I actually need to set these. And this one needs to be password. So the password is going to be whatever we pull out of that form. Okay, so we have our username and password, and we authenticated it. So once we authenticate it, we first want to check if that user is actually there before we redirect him. So if user is not none, so if we actually were able to authenticate and see that there was a user, let's go ahead and log this user in. So the login method, and there's a specific reason to why I call this login page. If we call this login, we're actually gonna have a conflict because that's a Django method here. So we're taking this login method right here, and we're gonna throw in the request and then the user. So we're gonna log this specific user in, and then we're gonna redirect them into the home page. So we called our dashboard here home in the name. So we're gonna go ahead and just throw that in, and we should be redirected. So let's go ahead and actually log a user in. So if I go back to my login page, so let's go to login, Dennis4. If I go ahead and hit that, string value object has no attribute PK. So let's see what's going on here. Give me a second to just debug this. And it looks like I threw in the username and not the user. So let's go ahead and just fix that really quick. I actually need to throw in the validated user. So if I go ahead and log this user in again, that should redirect me. And I think I need to return, not just redirect. So return, redirect. Sorry about those little mistakes there. We'll refresh that one more time. And there we go. So we're now in the home page. So what I want to do is actually provide a logout method and then go ahead and just restrict some pages. So right now, if the user is logged out, we'll still be able to access this page. So let's actually add a little bit more functionality here. So what we want to do is actually first check if the user is not none. So let's say we input the information wrong here. So we'll say else. And what we want to do is actually send in a flash message. So we want to say messages, and that's going to be the info message. And we'll throw in the request, and we'll just say username or password is incorrect. So what's happening here is username or password is incorrect. So what's happening here is because we're looping through all of our messages, all the messages that get sent here will be output. So we'll throw in that message, and then we want to return this same page here. So we'll just go ahead and make sure we send the user back to the login page. So let's go ahead and refresh that really quick. And let's just say, we'll throw in a user that we know we don't have. So if I hit login, context reference before assignment. And I actually don't think I need to return that template. So let's try that one more time. So if I just go ahead and do this and hit login. Okay, username or password is incorrect. So perfect. So we have that error handling. So we throw in the message and we render that user back to the template. So, and if it is a correct one, then we log them in. So let's go ahead and add a logout method, display the username so we know which user is actually logged in, and then go ahead and restrict some pages. So to throw in that login or that logout method, let's go ahead and create a view here called logout. So logout user, and we'll throw in the request. And what we're going to do is just go ahead and send the user back to the login page. So return value is going to be redirect, and we'll send them back to the login page when a user logs out. So we want them prepped to log in. So let's go ahead and throw that in here. And we don't need to build a template for this. And we'll just do log out, and we'll throw that in here, and then we'll just say log out user for the view. Now, before I forget this part, we actually need to process the logout method. So in that logout view, we're going to use this logout method that we imported and just log the user out and then redirect him to the homepage. So all we're going to do is just throw in the request, and that should handle logging the user out. So if I go back to my nav bar, we'll actually go ahead and just add the link up here. So we'll go ahead and just make sure everything's refreshed. Let's go ahead and minimize this because my screen's cutting this off. We'll actually put the logout button and the name of the user right here. So the first one we're going to do is going to be just a span tag, and we'll just say hello and then the username, and then we'll also throw in a link for the logout method. So we'll put that into a span tag so it's aligned, and we'll just do href and close this out, and we'll say logout, And the URL is just going to be that new logout URL that we created. So URL and logout. And I'll style this in a second. But now when we go back to our template, we're going to be able to click on this link. It's going to send us back to this method or this view and then send us to the login page. So if I refresh this, we're going to see the hello message and log out. So if I hit log out, we're going to be sent back here. And then if I log in, we'll be logged back in. So let's go ahead and actually display the username. So you can display a username by simply accessing request.user right in the template. So you don't need to pass that in. And we should be able to see a username. So if we're logged in as Dennis, and that says Dennis right there. So I'll just go ahead and style this. So we'll just say hello-msg, so hello message, and we'll just add a little bit of styling right here and make that white so we can actually see it. So we'll just put that in here, and we'll reference the ID. So hello-message, and font size, we'll just make sure that's a little bit bigger. So font size is going to be 18 pixels. Color is going to be white, so we're going to use this hex, and that's going to be $FFF. That should give us white. And we'll just set margin, so we'll create some spacing so we can actually see it. So margin dash right is going to be 20 pixels. So let's actually turn this into a class, and we'll just say, we'll just do this to bold. So the logout method has it too. Now I know the naming doesn't actually really match it, but that's okay for now. And we'll throw that to the link. So that'll be a little bit more styled. So if I refresh this, there we go. So hello Dennis, log out, and let's log in as Dennis2. And the password should be the same. And there we go, it's Dennis2. So if I actually log out and view this page, we're able to see it because we're not restricting it. So at this point, it just gives us an anonymous user. So let's go ahead and actually restrict the user access, so we can only see these pages when we're logged in. And then if we're logged in and we're on the home page, we don't want a logged in user to be able to see this. We want them to be able to we want them to be redirected back to the home page, so it'll send them there. So we'll restrict the login and the register page when a user is logged in. So this process is going to be a little bit manual right now. Normally, once a project gets bigger, you want to build in middleware for something like this to where this can all be processed within one file. But at this point, what we're going to do is actually put in something called login decorators above all of our views that we want restricted. So let's go ahead and run some imports first, and I'll explain what they do as we go. So from, and then let me just see what those were called here. So from Django.contrib.auth.decorators, make sure I spelled that right, import login required. So login underscore required. And oops. So the login required decorator. So what we're going to do now is we have to put this decorator above every view that we want restricted. So the first page we want restricted is going to be our home page. So we're going to set that decorator above the view. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to say, if that user is not logged in, go ahead and set the login URL and send them back to this page. So we want to send them back to the login page. So login required, and that needs to be an @ symbol. And we'll just put this above every single view that we want restricted. So I'll first put that above the home page. And let's go to our home view. So as I go to that home view, you can see in the browser that I'm actually being redirected. So if I log in, I'm allowed to be here. Once I log out and I try to go back to that URL, I automatically get logged back out. So, or I get redirected. So if I go to the products page, I'm fine. So what I need to do is make sure that that decorator is being put above every single view that I want restricted. So I don't want anybody creating orders if they're not logged in. I don't want them updating anything. And remember that login URL. So where are they being redirected if that user is not logged in? So I set that above everything, and that should now restrict all the pages. So what I want to do now is go ahead and manually write some functionality that restricts a user from the login page. So if I go to the login page right here, or even the register page actually, if I go here, I don't want a logged in user to be able to go to the login page or the register page. So I don't want them to be able to see this. If they're here, they need to be redirected. So what I'm going to do is within my register page, I'll start here. I'll say if request, and remember, I'm able to just access the user this way. So I'm accessing this request right here. So if request.user is authenticated, so what we're going to do is say is underscore authenticated. And that's just a method on the user, or sorry, not a method, but a property. So you wouldn't do something like that. You would just do is authenticated as is. Go ahead and log the user in. But if they're not, or if the user is authenticated, sorry. So if they're authenticated, go ahead and redirect them to the home page. So return. And again, middleware will let us write this functionality better. And I might do a video on that in the near future, but for now, we'll just manually do this so you can understand what's going on. We'll redirect the user to the home page if they're authenticated. And if not, so else, and then I'm just going to indent this and we'll just say log that user in. So we'll actually indent everything, and we'll do the same for the login page. So we'll just go ahead, and again, this is a really bad way of doing this because you're going to have to do this for every single page as far as putting the decorators on and writing this kind of logic. But I'm doing this just to understand what's going on, but we will fix this up later. So redirect the user to the home page, and then else run all of this functionality right here. So let's go ahead and give this a try. So if I am on the login page, the user is currently logged in. User has no attribute authenticated, so it looks like I misspelled something. So I'm just going to go ahead and fix that, and we'll fix this one above right here. Okay, so if I try to go to the login page, I get redirected here. If I log out and I try going to the home page, so now I can actually access the register page. But if I try going to the home page, I'm logged out. So that's all we have for user registration and logging in. In the next video, we'll actually handle user permissions. So different types of users can access different types of data and pages. So make sure you're watching and make sure you're subscribed, and thank you for your support.